When the news broke on October 24th, 2024 that Lil Durk had been arrested, it sent shockwaves far beyond the world of hip-hop. The charges were heavy, federal stuff, conspiracy to commit murder for hire. The story said he was picked up at an airport in Miami trying to leave the country. They said it was all tied to the tragic death of King Von back in 2020 and an alleged retaliation plot against rival rapper Quando Rondo. On the surface, it's another chapter in a grim, violent saga that has claimed way too many young lives. But for those of us who have seen this movie before, you have to look past the headlines and ask the hard questions. Why now? Why him? Durk isn't just a rapper, he's a phenomenon. They call him the Voice for a reason. His music is the unfiltered soundtrack for a generation of young black men navigating the concrete jungles of Chicago and cities just like it all across America. He speaks their pain, their anger, their hopes, and their losses. This isn't just about music, it's about influence. When a man has that kind of pull, when he can shape the thoughts and actions of millions of young people who feel forgotten by society, he becomes more than an entertainer. He becomes a leader, whether he asks for that title or not. And history has shown us time and time again what the system does to black leaders who have the ear of the streets. The official narrative is straightforward: a rapper caught up in the very street life his music details. The feds will tell you they've got evidence, a clear-cut case of a plot for revenge. They will point to the violence, the beefs, the social media posts, and build a picture that's easy for the public to swallow. It fits neatly into the box they've already created for artists like Durk, but we have to be smarter than that. We have to understand that the government has a long and documented history of using the law not just as a tool for justice, but as a weapon to neutralize threats. The threat, in this case, might not be a single act of violence, but the potential for something much bigger: unity. So, as we watch this case unfold, we must operate on two levels. We must follow the legal proceedings, the evidence, and the defense. But we must also look at the bigger picture, the historical context, and the political chessboard on which this is all playing out. Lil Durk's arrest is not just about one man. It's a moment that forces us to examine the relationship between black influence, state power, and the ever-present fear of a unified, self-determined black community. The hand of the state is heavy, and it often comes down hardest on those who have the power to lift our people up. We must stay vigilant and question the narrative every step of the way. Let's be clear, conspiracy isn't just something you find in the dark corners of the internet. For black folks in America, conspiracy is history. It's the Tuskegee experiment, it's the crack epidemic, it's COINTELPRO. To dismiss the idea that Durk's arrest could be part of a larger strategy is to ignore the well-documented playbook of the US government. The theory floating around is that this isn't just about stopping a murder plot, it's about stopping a movement before it can even begin. The whispers say that authorities fear Lil Durk's potential to unite Chicago's warring factions under a new banner, possibly one inspired by Islam, creating a modern-day revolutionary force. This might sound far-fetched to some, but you have to connect the dots. Think about Durk's trajectory. He's not just making street anthems anymore. Songs like All My Life with J. Cole show a man thinking bigger, speaking about breaking cycles and giving back. He started the Neighborhood Heroes Foundation trying to create positive change. He was gaining mainstream acceptance, even winning a Grammy. This is the profile of a man evolving, a man whose influence is growing beyond the block. To the powers that be, a man who can command the loyalty of the streets and also charm the mainstream is a dangerous combination. He becomes a bridge, capable of uniting disparate groups. The fear is not just about unity, but about the ideology that could fuel that unity. The theory specifically points to a Black Islamic revival. Why? Because Islam has a powerful history within black revolutionary movements in America. It provides a code of discipline, a spiritual framework, and a global identity outside the confines of American white supremacy. It offers a path to redemption and a blueprint for nation building. The government knows this. They've seen what happens when charismatic black leaders embrace Islam and use its principles to organize our people. They don't just see a rapper, they see the potential for a new Malcolm X, a new Jeff Fort. So, the arrest becomes a preemptive strike. By hitting him with federal charges of this magnitude, you effectively neutralize him. You tie him up in the legal system for years. You drain his resources. You tarnish his public image, making a hero of the streets look like just another violent criminal. The city of Broadview, Illinois, cutting ties with his charity immediately after the arrest is a perfect example of this. The system works swiftly to isolate and discredit. It's a calculated move to decapitate a potential movement by taking out its most visible and influential figure, ensuring that any seeds of revolutionary unity are stomped out before they can sprout. If you want to understand why the federal government might be spooked by the idea of a unified Islamic-inspired movement in Chicago, you only need to look back a few decades. You need to look at the story of Jeff Fort and the Blackstone Rangers. In the 1960s, the Rangers were one of Chicago's most powerful street gangs. They were organized, they were disciplined, and they controlled huge swaths of the South Side. The authorities saw them as a menace, a criminal enterprise that needed to be dismantled. But then, something changed. Jeff Fort, their leader, went to prison, and while inside, he discovered the teachings of the Nation of Islam. When he came out, he had a new vision. He and the Blackstone Rangers converted to Islam and renamed themselves the El Rukn tribe, which means the foundation in Arabic. They presented themselves as a religious organization. They wore fezes, they studied the Quran, and they established a new code of conduct based on Islamic principles. This transformation terrified the authorities far more than the gang activity ever did. Why? Because the El Rukns were no longer just a gang fighting over turf. They were an organized, disciplined, ideological force with a spiritual foundation that gave them a sense of purpose beyond street-level conflicts. They were building something. The government saw the El Rukns not as a religious group, but as a domestic threat. They saw a charismatic leader uniting thousands of young, disaffected black men under a banner of black nationalism and religious fervor. This was the government's worst nightmare come to life. They immediately launched a full-scale assault, using informants, wiretaps, and relentless legal pressure. They eventually charged Fort and other El Rukn leaders with conspiracy, alleging they were plotting terrorist acts on behalf of Libya. Whether the charges were legitimate or manufactured is still debated, but the outcome was the same. The organization was crushed, and its leadership was imprisoned for life. The lesson of the El Rukns is a chilling one. It demonstrates that the state is more threatened by organized black unity than by disorganized black-on-black violence. A city full of gangs fighting each other is a problem that can be managed with policing. A city with a unified, politically conscious, and spiritually grounded organization of thousands of young black men is a threat to the entire power structure. Lil Durk, with his immense influence over the same demographic in the same city, represents the potential for a 21st century version of this. The Fed saw what happened with Jeff Fort, and the theory suggests they are not willing to let history repeat itself. To truly grasp the weight of this conspiracy theory, you have to understand the unique and powerful role Islam has played in the black liberation struggle. For centuries, black people in America were fed a version of Christianity that demanded patience, forgiveness, and turning the other cheek in the face of brutal oppression. It was a religion often used to justify slavery and enforce submission. But Islam, particularly as it emerged in black communities in the 20th century, offered a starkly different path. It was a religion of self-respect, self-defense, and self-determination. It declared the black man as original, not as a cursed descendant of Ham. This ideological shift was revolutionary. Leaders like Malcolm X, before his transformative journey to Mecca, wielded the Nation of Islam's teachings like a sword. He used them to cut through the psychological chains of white supremacy. The NOI gave black men and women a new sense of identity, a history that didn't begin with slavery, and a code of ethics that demanded discipline, clean living, and economic independence. It took men from the streets, addicts, pimps and criminals, and transformed them into clean-cut, articulate, and fearless soldiers for the cause. This transformation was a powerful testament to the religion's ability to forge unity and purpose out of chaos. The influence wasn't limited to the Nation of Islam. As the Black Power movement grew, many activists found a home in Orthodox Sunni Islam. H. Rap Brown, the fiery chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and a Black Panther, eventually converted and became Jamil al-Amin. For him and many others, Islam provided a spiritual and ethical framework that politics alone could not. It was a complete way of life, a deen, that guided everything from personal conduct to the struggle against systemic injustice. It connected the Black American struggle to a global community of Muslims, creating a sense of international solidarity against colonialism and oppression. This history is precisely why the idea of a new Black Islamic movement is so potent and so feared by the establishment. Islam has proven its ability to do what few other forces can: unite Black people under a common identity, instill a powerful sense of discipline, and provide a moral justification for revolutionary change. It offers a clear alternative to the self-destructive cycles of street violence and nihilism. The government knows this. They have studied this history. They remember Malcolm X. They remember the El-Ruqs. They see the potential for a figure like Lil Durk, who already commands the loyalty of the youth, to tap into this powerful ideological current and ignite a fire they cannot control. The fear of Black unity isn't just a vague feeling in the halls of power. It has been official government policy. We don't have to speculate because the documents exist. The FBI's counterintelligence program, or COINTELPRO, was a secret and often illegal project aimed squarely at surveilling, infiltrating, discrediting, and destroying domestic political organizations. While they targeted many groups, their primary focus was on the Black liberation movement. The program's stated goals included preventing the rise of a messiah who could unify and electrify the militant Black nationalist movement. They were looking to stop the next Malcolm X before he could even speak his first sermon. COINTELPRO's tactics were insidious and devastating. They planted informants inside organizations like the Black Panther Party and the Nation of Islam. These informants didn't just gather information, they actively worked to sow discord and paranoia. They forged letters between leaders to create personal beefs and organizational splits. They spread false rumors to the media to tarnish reputations and turn the public against these groups. They used bad jacketing, or falsely labeling a loyal member as an informant, to create deadly internal purges. Their work directly led to arrests, imprisonment, and in some cases, the assassination of Black leaders. One of the most effective strategies of COINTELPRO was to exploit and inflame existing rivalries. The FBI famously sent forged letters to the Black Panther Party and a rival nationalist group called the U.S. Organization, led by Maulana Karenga. These letters were designed to create conflict, and they worked. The animosity between the two groups escalated into gunfire, resulting in the deaths of several Panthers. The FBI saw black-on-black violence not as a tragedy, but as a strategic victory. It kept the groups weak, divided, and focused on each other instead of their common oppressor. The blueprint was clear: divide and conquer. This history is not just in the past, its ghost haunts us today. The tactics of COINTELPRO provide a clear blueprint for how a modern-day movement could be disrupted. The principles remain the same, even if the technology has changed. Instead of forged letters, you can use fake social media profiles. Instead of planting rumors in newspapers, you can use blogs and YouTube channels. When we look at the seemingly endless cycle of beefs in the rap world, which often escalates into real-world violence, we have to ask, is all of this organic? Or is COINTELPRO's ghost still at work, subtly pushing buttons, fanning flames, and ensuring that our most influential voices remain locked in a cycle of self-destruction? To understand the scale of the threat Lil Durk might represent to the system, you have to appreciate just how far he has come. His journey is a testament to survival and ambition. He emerged from the hyper-violent drill scene of Chicago in the early 2010s, a world that the media dubbed Chirac. At that time, he was just one of many voices documenting the bleak reality of his environment. His music was raw, honest, and often tragic. Many of his peers from that era are now either dead or in prison. But Durk not only survived, he evolved. He honed his craft, moving beyond drill to become one of hip-hop's most versatile and melodic storytellers. His influence grew steadily, but the last few years have seen a meteoric rise. His album, The Voice, and the collaborative project The Voice of the Heroes with Lil Baby cemented his status as a superstar. But it was the 2024 Grammy win for All My Life that marked a new peak. Winning a Grammy isn't just about a gold statue, it's a symbol of mainstream validation. It puts you in a different stratosphere of influence. Suddenly, Lil Durk wasn't just the voice of the streets of Chicago. He was a globally recognized artist whose message was reaching millions of new listeners. He was becoming a household name. Alongside his musical success, Durk began to make moves that signaled a deeper purpose. He launched the Neighborhood Heroes Foundation, a charity focused on empowering at-risk youth in Chicago. He was actively trying to give back, to provide the resources and opportunities that he never had. He partnered with local governments like the suburbs of Bellwood and Broadview to set up mentorship programs. This is the work of a man looking to build a legacy beyond music. He was using his platform and his money to affect real-world change, positioning himself not just as an artist, but as a community leader. This combination of street credibility, mainstream success, and genuine community activism is incredibly powerful. Durk had the ear of the youth who felt alienated and ignored, but he was also gaining the legitimacy of the establishment. He could talk to the kids on the block and the mayor in the boardroom. This unique position made him a potential unifier, someone who could bridge worlds and organize his people on a massive scale. To an establishment that relies on division to maintain control, a figure like this doesn't just look like a success story. He looks like a problem that needs to be managed, contained, and, if necessary, eliminated. One of the most tragic and persistent features of the struggle for Black liberation has been internal conflict. From the Black Power era to the modern rap scene, infighting and rivalries have consistently undermined progress and unity. The official story is that these conflicts are just a natural, if unfortunate, part of the culture. But the historical record, especially the revelations from COINTELPRO, suggests a more sinister possibility. It suggests that these divisions are often not organic, but are intentionally created or amplified by outside forces who benefit from our disunity. This is the oldest and most effective play in the colonizer's handbook. Think about the beef between Lil Durk's OTF and Quando Rondo's crew. It's a conflict that has led to immense tragedy, most notably the death of King Von. On the surface, it's a hip-hop beef that spiraled out of control, but within the framework of a conspiracy to suppress Black unity, it looks different. It looks like a perfect opportunity for an outside agent to intervene. An informant or an agent provocateur could easily whisper in someone's ear, spread a false rumor, or manipulate a situation to turn tension into deadly violence. The goal would be to keep these powerful crews focused on destroying each other, rather than recognizing their shared enemy in systemic oppression. This strategy serves multiple purposes for the state. First, it directly leads to the incarceration or death of influential young Black men, physically removing them from the board. Second, the constant violence validates the media narrative that these communities are inherently criminal and beyond saving, justifying aggressive policing and state surveillance. Third, and most importantly, it prevents the consolidation of power. If OTF and other Chicago crews were to unite, they would represent a formidable force. By keeping them locked in a perpetual state of war, the system ensures that this unification never happens. The energy that could be used for community building is instead wasted on funerals and revenge plots. This isn't to absolve anyone of personal responsibility for their actions. The choices made were real, and the consequences were devastating. However, we must be sophisticated enough to understand that individuals can be manipulated. People operating under extreme stress, paranoia, and grief are particularly vulnerable to outside influence. The theory doesn't claim that government agents pulled the triggers. It suggests they may have helped load the guns and point them in the right direction, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of violence that serves their ultimate goal: to keep the Black community divided, weak, and under control. At the heart of this entire theory is one fundamental truth. The American power structure is deeply, existentially afraid of a united Black populace. This isn't just about a few protests or riots. It's about the fear of a truly organized, economically independent, and politically conscious Black community that decides to opt out of the existing system and build its own. A community that stops feeding its children into the school-to-prison pipeline. A community that pools its resources to create its own businesses, schools, and security forces. A community that stops participating in the cycles of violence that only benefit the private prison and weapons industries. This is the real threat. Imagine for a moment if an influential figure like Lil Durk, with his deep connection to the streets and his growing mainstream platform, were to successfully broker a truce between the major factions in Chicago. Imagine if he used his influence and perhaps the unifying principles of Islam to redirect all that energy. The manpower, the discipline, and the street-level intelligence that are currently used for destructive purposes could be harnessed for community defense, economic development, and political mobilization. Chicago would be transformed. The violence that plagues the city would plummet, not because of more police, but because of internal resolution. This scenario would create a powerful new model for Black empowerment that could be replicated in cities across the country. It would expose the lie that more policing is the only solution to urban violence. It would threaten the billions of dollars that flow into police departments, surveillance technology companies, and the prison industrial complex. It would challenge the very foundation of systemic control, which relies on portraying Black communities as chaotic and in need of outside intervention. A united, self-policing, and self-sufficient Black community is the system's worst nightmare because it renders the system irrelevant. This is why a figure like Durk, at the potential nexus of street power, cultural influence, and revolutionary ideology, had to be neutralized. His arrest under this theory is not about punishing a crime, but about preventing a revolution. It's about making an example of him. The message is clear. You can be a successful rapper, you can make millions of dollars, but the moment you try to convert that cultural capital into real, organized power for your people, the moment you try to unite the tribes, we will come for you. We will use the full weight of the federal government to crush you and everything you are trying to build.